When you sit down to watch a film, you usually just let the story wash over you, right?
Absolutely. You're just
Yep.
along for the ride.
Yeah, you're tracking the plot, you're, trying to figure out who the bad guy is, waiting to see if the hero makes it out alive.
Right.
But if you ever turn on, like, the director's commentary track, your entire experience of that visual narrative totally changes.
Oh, completely. It's a whole different movie.
Exactly. Suddenly you hear the director say, notice how we pushed the camera in right here. Notice how we blurred out the background in this shot. We, dropped the lighting completely to make you feel the claustrophobia of the room.
Yeah, the intentionality of it all.
Right. And you realize you weren't just passively watching a security camera recording. You were being carefully, meticulously guided. I mean, every focal length, every pan, every rack focus was this deliberate choice to make you feel something specific.
It's all highly curated.
It is. And that shift from passively watching to appreciating the meticulous craft of a film director is exactly what we are applying to the New Testament today.
I am so excited for this.
Me too. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we are diving into a truly fascinating essay titled Seeing What the Author Sees, Greek Verbal Aspect and Discourse Analysis in New Testament Exegesis.
It really is a remarkable piece of scholarship because, it takes ancient Greek grammar, which,
Right.
let's be honest, people often treat as this static, dead code to be cracked.
Oh, totally. Just a math equation.
Right. But it reveals it to be this dynamic, living architecture of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So for this deep dive, we are basically stepping into the sandals of two highly caffeinated biblical scholars to decode the secret grammatical signals the original Greek authors used.
We want to find out where they put the camera.
Exactly. Where is the camera and why did they put it there?
Yeah.
But, to find out where they put the camera, we actually have to unlearn an incredibly pervasive assumption first.
Oh, the seminary myth.
Yeah, the big one. Almost everything we've been taught in Sunday school, and frankly, what a lot of pastors were historically taught in seminary about Greek tenses, meaning time, is a well-intentioned myth.
Wait, really? So, all those word study sermons are based on a myth?
A lot of them, yeah.
Mm.
There's this quiet revolution happening right now in biblical linguistics. It's been spearheaded by scholars over the last, I'd say, 3 decades, and it completely upends the traditional approach.
So the essay points specifically to the Herbert Weir Smith view, right? Which has pretty much dominated for generations.
Right. Smith wrote the gold standard Greek grammar book back in the day.
And his view basically maps Greek tenses onto this standard clean timeline. Like an aorist tense means past time. A present tense means present time. A future tense means later. It basically mimics how English works.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It mimics English. It is profoundly misleading because it mistakes a secondary, context-driven implication for the primary meaning of the Greek verb itself.
So we're projecting our language roles onto theirs.
Exactly. Herbert Weir Smith and, all the generations of grammarians who followed his paradigm, they were working with an inherent bias. They were trying to force Koine Greek into an English or Latin mold.
Because we love a clean spreadsheet approach to history, right? Event A happened, then event B is happening.
Then event C will happen.
Yeah.
But the Greek verb form inherently does not encode time.
That's mind-blowing.
It is. And this quiet revolution, championed by modern linguists like Constantine Campbell, is the realization that Greek tense forms primarily encode aspect, not time.
Okay, I want to make sure we really nail down this definition of verbal aspect because everything else we talk about today builds on it.
For sure.
So the way Campbell frames it, aspect, is how the speaker or author conceptualizes the action in relation to itself. It's the author's chosen perspective.
Yes, the perspective.
So rather than looking at a verb as a clock on the wall telling us when something happened, we need to look at the verb as a lens telling us how we are supposed to view the action.
I love that. The lens, not the clock.
Yeah.
And Campbell simplifies the whole system beautifully. He argues that Greek basically has a two-aspect system, perfective and imperfective.
Okay, perfective and imperfective.
Right. The author is constantly choosing between these two lenses. Are you looking at the action from the outside as a complete whole? Or are you looking at the action from the inside as this unfolding process?
The essay uses this brilliant analogy that really clarified the perfective aspect for me, which is usually the aorist tense in Greek.
The airplane analogy.
Yes. It compares the aorist tense to looking at a mountain range from a 30,000-foot airplane window.
That's such a good visual.
It really is. Because when you're at 30,000 feet looking down at the Rockies, you don't see the individual trees, right? You don't see the little switchbacks on the trail or the gravel.
Yeah.
You just see the gestalt, the bounded whole of the mountain range.
You see the shape of it.
Yeah. That is the perfective aspect. It presents an action as a complete, discrete, bounded event. It just summarizes it.
It packages the event. And the crucial thing to understand here, and this is where people get tripped up, is that duration in reality doesn't matter at all to the aorist.
What do you mean?
Well, an author can write Caesar conquered Gaul using the aorist tense, even though that military campaign took years of bloody day-by-day progression.
Oh, right.
Or an author can write lightning struck using the exact same aorist tense, which takes, a fraction of a millisecond.
So the actual time it took in the real world is irrelevant to the grammar.
Totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
The author is simply choosing to frame the event with a wide establishing shot. It's the workhorse tense of narrative, basically building the backbone of the story by moving from one completed event to the next.
Okay, so if the perfective aspect is the airplane view, the wide establishing shot, then the imperfective aspect, which we see in the present or imperfect tenses, is the hiker on the trail.
Yes, down in the dirt.
You are down in the woods, you see the massive pines towering over you, you feel the gravel slipping under your boots, you are acutely aware of the ongoing internal development of the journey.
Exactly. The action is not bounded, it's open, it's unfolding, and the author has placed the camera right in the middle of the sequence.
Which is such a different vibe.
It is. That internal vantage point is essential for setting scenes and creating tension. The imperfective aspect forces the reader to experience the action as a process rather than, like, a closed file.
Okay, but wait, I need to push back on this timeline issue for a second.
Go for it.
Because if the actual Greek word, the verb itself, doesn't tell us when it happened, if the whole language is just built on these camera angles of the mountain versus the hiker, how did the early church ever know a story was actually in the past?
Right, that's the big question.
I mean, if I'm reading the Gospel of John and the verbs don't have inherent time, does the whole timeline just collapse? Like, how do I know John isn't writing a prophecy about tomorrow?
It is a totally fair logical objection. It's usually the immediate hurdle everyone faces when they first encounter aspect theory.
So how does it work?
Well, the timeline doesn't collapse, but the mechanism for establishing time shifts. It shifts from the verb form itself to the surrounding architecture of the sentence. You know an event is in the past because of context, deictic indicators, and the mood of the verb.
Deictic indicators, those are those pointing words, right? Like yesterday, then, or after this.
Precisely. Those spatial and temporal markers anchor the narrative for the reader. But even more critically, time is established by the mood. In Greek, the indicative mood is the mood of reality assertion.
Reality assertions.
Yeah. When an author uses the indicative mood, they are making a claim about reality relative to their speech act. So if they're speaking about something that is a settled reality from their vantage point, the indicative mood combined with contextual clues places it in the past. The verb form, the aorist, or the imperfect, merely provides the aspect. The surrounding paragraph gives you the timeline. As readers, we basically have to rewire our brains. The second we see a verb, we have to stop instinctively asking, when did this happen? And start asking, how is the author presenting this action to me right now?
We have to look at the framing, not the clock.
Exactly.
And this brings us to what I think is Campbell's most radical contribution, which completely upends how we understand the famous Greek perfect tense.
Oh man, the perfect tense. This is where it gets so good.
Right. Traditionally, the perfect tense was taught as a third aspect. Grammarians used to call it stative.
Yep, the stative aspect.
The idea was that the perfect tense described a past action that resulted in a present state, like saying, I've closed the door, meaning the action happened in the past and the door remains closed right now. It was treated as this entirely separate category alongside perfective and imperfective.
But Campbell looks at that traditional model and argues, with incredibly rigorous linguistic backing, by the way, that Greek actually doesn't have three aspects. It only has two.
Just the two.
Yeah. The perfect tense isn't a third aspect. It is simply the imperfective aspect combined with altered spatial values. It utilizes spatial metaphorical proximity.
Spatial metaphorical proximity.
I know it's a mouthful.
It is, but I was reading his breakdown of this, and it struck me that he's essentially talking about the depth of field in a camera lens.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because we intuitively use language to create distance or closeness. Like if I say that situation over there, I'm creating psychological and spatial distance. But if I say this situation right here, I'm creating immediate proximity.
Right.
And Campbell argues that Greek verbs operate on this spatial metaphorical continuum. The present tense is your default baseline. It's proximate, normal, closeness. The imperfect tense, which is used for background past narrative, is remote. It pushes the action away from you into the distance.
And that framework explains exactly what the perfect tense is doing. The perfect tense utilizes a zoom lens.
A zoom lens.
Yeah. It takes an action, views it imperfectively from the inside, and applies heightened proximity. It pulls a past action right up to the reader's face. It takes something that happened in the past and renders it intensely vivid, existential, and operative in the reader's immediate reality.
It's an extreme close-up. It's like, okay, it's like you're watching a standard wide-shot history documentary on your TV, and suddenly the director drops a VR headset over your eyes.
That's exactly it.
The author reaches through the page, grabs you by the collar, and says, this isn't just history that happened way back then. This is right here, right now, vibrating in your living room.
Yes.
The essay uses a stunning example of this from Paul in Romans 5.5. Paul writes, the love of God has been poured out into our hearts. In the Greek, he uses the perfect tense, keikachitai.
Keikachitai. And if we read that with the old, timeline-only view, the theological impact is severely muted. We just think, okay, at some point in the past, God poured out his love. Past event resulting in a present state. Check.
It becomes cold data.
Completely cold.
Yeah.
But applying Campbell's spatial proximity lens.
The theology just explodes off the page. Paul is using the perfect tense to pull that divine self-giving into maximal immediacy. It's not just a historical event to look back upon with, polite gratitude.
No, the pouring out of God's love stands vividly, dynamically present in the believer's current visceral experience. It is heightened proximity. It's right in your face, meant to be felt in the exact moment of reading the letter.
That completely reshapes how you read Paul. You start realizing he is managing the emotional distance of his audience sentence by sentence.
He's a master at it.
And the mirror image of this perfect tense zoom lens is the pluperfect tense.
Right.
If the perfect is an extreme close-up pulling the subject into your face, the pluperfect is heightened remoteness. It pushes the action far into the deep background.
Right. It's the wide, sweeping drone shot that establishes the world before the main characters even walk on screen. The essay points to John 18.18 for this.
Set the scene for us.
So the narrative is tense. Jesus is being betrayed. There's all this intense action happening in the aorist. But John needs to set the scene to explain why Peter is where he is. So John mentions the guards standing around the fire, and he uses the pluperfect. They had been standing. Heistokaisen.
He pushes them way into the back of the set. They're basically out of focus in the deep background.
Exactly. It creates this atmospheric, shadowy background against which the intense drama of the betrayal and Peter's denial is going to play out. It's pure scene setting, doubly removed from the mainline action.
This tool understanding the camera angles, the focal length, the deep background is so sharp. But, because we've misunderstood it for so long, treating Greek verbs like a calendar instead of a camera, this misunderstanding actually bleeds into how these texts are preached every Sunday.
Oh, it really does.
We need to do some scholar-to-scholar myth-busting about pulpit grammar, because there is a massive confusion out there between aspect and a concept called action cert.
Yeah, this is where linguistic theory meets the reality of the pew, and the collision is often really messy.
He's a good word for it.
Pastors naturally want to draw out the richness of the Greek text for their congregations.
Yeah.
Right? So they jump into a Greek interlinear tool, they find a grammatical label, and they preach it. But because they are operating on that old Smith paradigm, they frequently commit the action sart fallacy.
So let's define action sart, because it's distinct from aspect. We've established that aspect is purely the author's chosen perspective, the camera angle.
Right.
But action sart, which is a German linguistic term, refers to the actual objective behavior or type of action as it happens in reality. Like, is the action inherently ongoing? Is it a quick split-second occurrence? Does it inherently require repetition?
A helpful way to think about it is that action sart is not encoded directly in the verb's tense. It emerges from a formula. It's a combination of the chosen aspect plus the surrounding context, plus the inherent lexical meaning of the verb itself.
Right, the lexical meaning, like sneezing versus sleeping.
That's a perfect example.
If I say, he sneezed, the inherent meaning of that root word is a rapid, instantaneous expulsion of air. You can't really sneeze continuously for an hour.
Not without passing out.
Exactly. But if I say, he slept, the inherent meaning of the word requires duration. You can't sleep for a millisecond. So the actual shape of the action in reality is dictated heavily by the word chosen, not just the tense it's conjugated in.
And that brings us to the classic myth regarding imperatives, commands in the Bible. The traditional pulpit myth goes like this. If you see a present tense imperative, it means you must keep on doing the action repeatedly and continually on a calendar.
Right.
And if you see an aorist imperative, it means you must do it once and for all and never do it again.
Oh man, I have heard this preached countless times. The Greek text here uses the present imperative church, which means Paul isn't just telling you to rejoice. He's saying keep on, continually, ceaselessly, nonstop rejoicing.
The preacher voice is spot on.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds extremely pious. It preaches incredibly well, but linguistically, you are saying it's completely untenable.
It is completely untenable because it forces the camera angle, the aspect, to dictate the calendar frequency, which it was never, ever designed to do. You can't just look at a present imperative and mathematically equate it to keep on doing this repeatedly.
So what happens when we apply that rule to actual biblical commands?
The formula breaks down completely. Let's look at several famous commands to see why. Take the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6.9. Jesus says, pray then like this. That is a present imperative.
Okay.
So if the myth were true, Jesus is commanding his followers to keep on continually saying these exact words over and over 24 hours a day without ever stopping.
Which obviously contradicts the very point he just made a few verses earlier about not using empty repetition.
Exactly. Let's look at another one. Ephesians 5.18. Paul says, do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. Be filled is a present imperative.
Oh, pastors love this one. Keep on being filled repeatedly. Get a refill every day.
Which fundamentally misrepresents the theology of the Holy Spirit's indwelling. The Spirit doesn't leak out requiring daily top-ups, or consider 1 Thessalonians 5.12, rejoice always. It's a present imperative.
Yeah.
But the word always, pantode, is already there in the sentence, providing the temporal frequency.
Right. If the present imperative inherently meant continually, adding the word always would be this bizarre redundancy, like saying continually rejoice continually.
Yeah.
My favorite example of where this goes wrong, and it gets kind of serious here, is 1 John 3.9. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning. Older translations used to really struggle with this because it uses a present tense verb.
Right. The old keep on sinning translation.
Yes. So commentators, leaning on that Smith view, would say, see, a Christian might sin a little bit, but they won't keep on continually sinning. And they base entire theological systems of sanctification on the assumption that the present tense mathematically means continuous calendar repetition.
It's a dangerous exegetical game. We really have to rescue these pastors by giving them a better tool to express the beauty of what the Greek is actually doing.
So let's let them off the hook. If the present imperative doesn't mean keep on continually doing it on a calendar, what does it actually mean?
Well, the difference isn't about frequency at all. It's about the relational and psychological perspective from which the command is issued.
Okay, let's break that down. If a biblical author uses an aorist, imperative, perfective aspect, the wide shot, how are they framing the command?
They are viewing the commanded action as a complete whole. They are calling for definite actions, a closed frame. Accomplish this. It is simple, direct, and focused on the boundaries of the task.
But if they use a present, imperative, imperfective aspect, the hiker on the trail, they're inviting you into the interior of a process.
Yes. And furthermore, they are presenting the commanded action as a reality to be entered into and experienced from the inside.
Oh, wow.
So when Paul says, be filled with the Spirit with a present imperative, he isn't handing you a theological punch card of repeated actions you need to complete.
Right.
He is inviting you into an ongoing, unfolding, immersive state of being. He's saying, step into this landscape. Let the camera surround you with this reality. It's a subtle relational difference in how the command is issued, but it's much richer and more deeply formative than a mere calendar frequency.
I'm not giving you a punch card. I'm inviting you into an immersive landscape. That framing is stunning. And to be honest, it actually preaches significantly better than the myth.
I completely agree.
Okay, so we spent all this time talking about how aspect sets up these individual camera shots, the extreme close-ups, the wide shots, the interior tracking shots. But individual shots don't make a movie.
No, they don't.
Discourse analysis is how the author takes all those individual shots and edits the whole film together.
Right, we're moving from the microscopic grammar of the sentence to the macroscopic architecture of the entire story. We are basically walking into the editing bay.
The grammar of the film director. The essay brings in Systemic Functional Linguistics, or SFL, which was developed by Michael Halliday, along with the bottom-up Koine Greek insights of scholars like Stephen Levinsohn and Stephen Runge.
Brilliant scholars.
Now, I know systemic functional linguistics sounds intensely academic, but it is the key that unlocks the topographical landscape of a biblical story. So let's unpack SFL. Halliday recognized that language doesn't just passively transmit cold data. Language actually does things.
Yeah, Halliday argued that every single text performs three metafunctions simultaneously.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, there's the ideational metafunction. This means the text constructs a picture of reality. It tells you who did what to whom.
Basic facts.
Right. Second, there's the interpersonal metafunction. The text manages a relationship between the speaker and the hearer. It dictates the emotional distance, the authority dynamics, the level of intimacy.
Like the VR headset versus the drone shot.
Exactly. And third, there is the textual metafunction. The language organizes itself into a coherent, navigable message. It builds the signposts so you don't get lost while reading.
And what Levinsohn and Runge did was take Halliday's broad linguistic theory and ask, how did the guys writing the New Testament in Koine Greek actually accomplish these three metafunctions?
And the results were fascinating.
Right. What they found is that Greek authors used these verbal aspects we've been discussing to map out the topography, the hills and valleys of their stories. It creates this brilliant three-tier system: background, mainline, and foreground.
It is the ultimate framework for reading biblical narrative. Let's look at how the editing bay actually works. So the lowest tier is the background. This provides the context. It answers the establishing questions. Who was present? What was the political climate? What was the weather like? What was the general situation before the inciting incident occurred?
And what tense do they use for that?
As we've established, Greek authors love to use imperfects and pluperfects for this tier. The imperfective aspect, looking at ongoing processes, is the ideal lens for painting a background scene. It leaves the edges blurry so your eye isn't drawn to it as the main event.
It's the set dressing.
Exactly.
Then we have the second tier, the main line. This is the backbone of the narrative.
The main line is the sequence of sequential events, the what happened next chain. And for this tier, the author reaches for the aorist tense, the perfective aspect.
The wide shots.
Right. These are bounded, complete actions that step the plot forward one notch at a time. Jesus arrived. The Pharisees questioned him. Jesus answered. They ticked up stones. Bam, bam, bam. It's the steady tracking shot following the characters through the scene.
But then we get to the third tier, the foreground, the spotlight. And this introduces my favorite concept in this entire essay, the historical present.
Oh, this is the best part.
I really want to spend some time here because it completely blew my mind. What is the historical present and why does it matter so much?
Okay, the historical present occurs when an author is recounting a narrative that is clearly, unambiguously set in the past, but they suddenly, jarringly use a present tense verb.
Okay.
We actually intuitively do this in spoken English when we are telling an engaging story.
Yeah.
You might say, so I was walking down the street yesterday, minding my own business, and this guy walks right up to me, looks me in the eye, and says.
Yes. When we hear someone do that at a dinner party, we intuitively know they are shifting the energy. They are raising the stakes of the story.
The Greek authors, particularly John and Mark, use this device masterfully. If you read the Gospel of John in Greek, there is a relentless, almost overwhelming use of the word ligi, which means he says...
Present tense.
Right, present tense. Over and over again, right in the middle of a past tense narrative built on aorists, John will drop in a present tense ligi. Jesus says. Historically, traditional grammarians looked at this and just called it vividness, waving it away as a stylistic quirk.
Right. The old assumption was basically, oh, John just wasn't very polished with his grammar. He kept mixing up his tenses because he was a fisherman, not a scholar. Which is, honestly, incredibly condescending to the text.
It really is.
But wait, if John is constantly using he says in the historical present, doesn't that just mean it's his default way of writing dialogue? Like, why assume it's a deliberate focus pull rather than just a bad habit?
Because the data shows it's not arbitrary. He doesn't use it for every piece of dialogue. He uses it selectively. Campbell and Runge argue that the historical present is a massive, deliberate discourse marker.
Okay, unpack that.
Think about the linguistics we just discussed. The present tense is the imperfective aspect combined with default spatial proximity. So right in the middle of the aorist tracking shot, where the action is neatly packaged and moving along, John uses a verb form that violently pulls the action out of the past, brings it up close to your face, and forces you inside it.
It is a deliberate break in the pattern.
Exactly. Some sense as an alarm bell. When John breaks a mainline narrative to drop a historical present, he says, it is a neon sign shouting to the reader, pay attention. The physical action of this story is taking a backseat. This specific speech act has massive theological and revelatory weight. He is pulling focus entirely onto the dialogue.
It's like a sudden rack focus in a film, where the background goes blurry and the character's face becomes crystal clear. It forces you to stop and lean in.
That's a perfect analogy.
And it's not just the verbs doing this editing work, right? The essay also dives into Runge's work on conjunctions, those tiny joining words like and or but.
Oh yeah, conjunctions in Greek are incredibly sophisticated. They act as the literal cuts in the editing bay.
Like cutting film strips.
Exactly. For example, the word kai, which we lazily translate as just and, typically claims a tight semantic connection with what just happened. It binds sequential events together. It's a smooth match cut.
Okay.
But the word day, which we often translate as but or now, is a boundary marker. It signals a hard cut, a new step, a development in the discourse, a shift in scene or characters.
So when a Greek author combines a boundary marking dia hard cut with a spotlighting historical present verb,
they are essentially firing a flare gun into the sky. They are using every grammatical tool at their disposal to ensure you do not miss the theological payload of what is about to be said.
Okay, we have all our theories on the whiteboard now. We've got the 30,000-foot wide shots, the extreme close-up zoom lenses, the tracking shots, the hard cuts, and the rack focus spotlights.
We've got the whole toolkit.
So now we need to take all of this out into the field and look at a real biblical text. Let's look at one of the most famous stories in the Bible, the wedding at Cana in John chapter 2, Jesus turning water into wine. I want to walk through a real-time verse-by-verse analysis of this story using this convergence of Campbell's aspects and SFL discourse analysis. Let's see the director actually at work.
It is a masterclass in narrative architecture.
Yeah.
So we start at John 2, verse 1. We immediately see the director setting the stage. John writes, on the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. The primary verb was, in Greek, is an imperfect.
The hiker on the trail.
Right. John is establishing the background here. There is no forward plot movement yet. It's the wide establishing shot panning across the wedding banquet.
We see the guests, we see the stone jars in the background, we see Mary, we see Jesus and his disciples sitting down. We're just taking in the environment. It's pure textual set dressing.
Then the inciting incident hits. They run out of wine. And suddenly, the action begins. John switches to the aorist tense to drive the mechanical mainline of the narrative.
The tracking shot starts moving.
Yes. Look at verse 3. Mary said aorist to him, they have no wine. Later, jumping to verses 7 through 9, Jesus said aorist to the servants, fill the jars with water. And they filled aorist them up to the brim. And he said aorist to them, now draw some out.
Bam, bam, bam.
Exactly. All these aorists are the steady tracking shot, mechanically moving the plot from problem to solution. The problem is stated, the commands are given, the water is moved.
But right in the middle of that mechanical sequence, there are massive spikes in the topography, the dialogue spikes.
This is where the historical present shines brilliantly. Let's look closely at verse 4. Mary has just informed Jesus that they are out of wine. Jesus is about to respond, but John doesn't use the normal aorist here. He uses the historical present. Lege.
There's the flare gun.
Jesus says to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. John racks the focus all the way in. He breaks the past tense tracking shot to capture the profound theological weight of Jesus' words.
He's telling the reader, don't just read this as a casual conversation between a mother and son about catering.
Right, this is about his impending cross, his hour. Pay attention to the theology of this moment.
It's breathtaking when you see the scaffolding underneath the English translation. You realize John isn't just reciting facts like a court reporter. He is orchestrating your theological experience of the text. He is forcing you to look at the cross in the middle of a wedding.
It really is.
But here is the absolute best part of this case study. I had a massive paradigm shift reading this. Where is the climax of this story? Like, if you asked 100 Sunday school kids or even 100 pastors, they would say the climax is the moment the water actually turns into wine, right? That's the miracle.
Naturally. It's the magic moment. It's what the entire story seems to be building toward.
But grammatically, structurally, that's not the climax at all. The grammar tells a completely different story about what John, the author, thinks is the most important part of the event. Take us to verse 11, the discourse peak.
Okay, so in discourse analysis, a peak is the point of maximum narrative and theological resolution. Authors don't leave this to chance. They mark the peak with a dense cluster of grammatical signals.
So what happens in verse 11?
In John 2.11, after the master of the banquet tastes the miraculously provided wine, John gives us his narrator's summary statement. He writes, "This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him."
Did, manifested, believe.
3 rapid-fire aorist verbs right in a row. Ipoiesin did. Iphanerison manifested. Ipistousin believed. John forms a tight, highly interpretive cluster. He uses the perfective aspect, that 30,000-foot airplane view of a completed, bounded whole, to wrap up the entire event and assert its ultimate significance.
Oh, wow.
The discourse peak isn't the chemical reaction of the water changing color. In fact, John barely describes the miracle itself. The climax is the theological meaning of the event: action, significance, response. Jesus did the sign, he showed his glory, the disciples responded with faith. Total narrative resolution.
The grammar literally points to the theology as the true climax of the story.
Yes.
The director zooms out to the airplane view, shows you the entire mountain range of what just happened, and says, "There." That's why I told you this story. Not so you'd know about a cool magic trick at a wedding, but so you would see his glory and understand the mechanics of faith.
And there's one more stunning detail hidden in verse 11. It's not about what John wrote. It's about what John strategically didn't write. It's the strategic absence of the perfect tense.
Yes. Talk about the disciples believing.
John says the disciples believed, epistousin using an aorist verb, perfective aspect, a bounded snapshot event. Now, recall what we learned about the perfect tense earlier.
The VR headset. Heightened proximity.
Right. It creates an ongoing standing reality that presses into the present. Later in John's Gospel, when characters possess mature, fully formed, unshakable faith, John deliberately switches to the perfect tense. I have believed and stand committed.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But here, at the wedding at Cana, he uses the aorist. Why? Because the disciples' faith wasn't a matured, standing reality yet. It was just a beginning. It was an initial, bounded event triggered by a sign. The aspectual choice is doing profound theological work, showing us that the story of their faith is still in its infancy. It's fragile. It's just starting.
That attention to detail is staggering. This completely reshapes how we interact with the text. I mean, reading the Bible without understanding discourse analysis is like reading a movie script with all the director's stage directions, lighting cues, and camera angles blacked out with a Sharpie.
You miss half the story.
You get the dialogue, you get the basic plot summary, but you lose the texture, the pacing, the intended emphasis. You lose the art. But with these linguistic tools, we finally get the director's cut.
It honors the intricate, careful craftsmanship of the authors. They weren't just slapping words onto papyrus. They were masterful communicators, engineering and experience.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've gone from hikers and airplanes to zoom lenses and deep background establishing shots. We've debunked the punch card approach to imperatives and mapped out the topographical landscape of John 2.
That's a lot to take in.
It is, but theory is useless without application. How do we put this into practice tomorrow morning? The essay distills this complex linguistic theory down to actionable takeaways for 3 distinct audiences. Let's start with the academic exegete, the seminary student, or the scholar. What is their marching order?
For the academic, the primary takeaway is to establish a strict, disciplined hierarchy of analysis. They must stop the lazy practice of jumping straight from a Greek tense form directly to a grand theological conclusion.
No more present tense means ongoing continuousness papers.
Exactly. You cannot simply see a present tense verb and write a 20-page paper on the theology of ongoing continuousness. You have to do the discourse homework first.
Right, aspect, then action start, then discourse function, then theological synthesis.
Precisely in that order. You first identify the chosen perspective, the aspect. Then you determine the real world shaped the action based on context and the verb's inherent meaning, the action start.
Right.
Then you zoom out and see how that verb fits into the macroscopic topography of the story. Is it mainline, background, or foreground? That's discourse. Only after you have mapped the architecture can you make your theological claim. This rigorous process prevents both overreading and underreading the text.
Okay, audience number 2. The pastor or preacher. They are deep in the trenches. They don't have 40 hours a week to map discourse topography or parse Koine Greek verbs, but they desperately want to preach faithfully and accurately. Do they need a PhD in systemic functional linguistics to use this?
Absolutely not. The beauty of this framework is its accessibility once you know what to look for. Use your English interlinear tools, but look for the structural spikes.
Look for the spikes.
Yeah, look for the historical presence. If you are reading a narrative in Mark or John, and the text suddenly shifts from he did, he walked, he went, to he says, you have just found your spotlight. The author is foregrounding that moment. Build your sermon around that speech act.
Because the author already built the scene around it.
Exactly. And look for the perfect tenses. When a past event is inexplicably described as has been poured out or has been accomplished, recognize that as the zoom lens. The author wants that past reality to press heavily on the congregation's present reality. Find those spikes and you have found the organic focal points for Sunday's sermon. You don't have to invent a clever emphasis. The author already highlighted it for you in neon.
Don't invent the emphasis, find the spike. That is phenomenal pastoral advice.
Okay, audience number 3, the lay reader. The person listening to this deep dive right now who has never studied Greek, doesn't own an interlinear, and just reads their English translation on their lunch break. What does this grammatical deep dive mean for them?
For the lay reader, the encouragement is to deeply trust your intuition.
Trust your intuition. Yeah, because a good modern translation like the ESV, NIV, or CSB tries very hard to capture these topographical swells in the English text. Even without knowing a single word of Greek, you will feel it when a passage suddenly becomes more vivid. You will sense when the dialogue gets inexplicably intense, or when an author pauses to summarize a sweeping point.
You feel the energy shift.
Right. When you feel that textual intensity, realize that you are feeling the ripples of the original Greek structure. You are sensing the author's camera angles shining through the translation. Lean into that. Pay close attention to what the text highlights in those moments, because understanding that topography helps us see not just the historical facts of the Bible, but the very mind and intention of the biblical author.
You're feeling the swells. I love that. Well, we have reached the end of an incredibly dense, rewarding deep dive. To briefly recap this journey, we started by completely shattering the clock-on-the-wall myth of Greek time, realizing that tenses are actually about the author's camera angle, the perfective airplane, and the imperfective hiker.
R.I.P. Herbert Ware Smith.
Seriously. We saw how the perfect tense acts like a zoom lens, bringing past realities into our existential present. We debunked the punch card myth of the present imperative, discovering instead a beautiful invitation into an immersive process. We learned to read the text like a film director, tracking the aorist main line and the historical present focus pulls. And we watched it all seamlessly come together in a brilliant climax at the wedding at Tina.
It's an architecture of communication that, once you learn how to see it, you can never unsee. It transforms the reading experience entirely.
It really does. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. It's something we haven't explicitly said yet, but it builds on everything we've uncovered. If the New Testament authors were this intentional, if they were using grammar to push, pull, spotlight, and focus your attention with the meticulous precision of a master film director, then the biblical text isn't just meant to inform you of historical facts.
It's not a textbook.
Exactly. It is not a cold encyclopedia of ancient events. The very grammatical structure itself is designed to form you. It is designed to create an experience of revelation. The text acts upon you.
It's the difference between reading a recipe and eating a meal. The grammar is preparing the meal for you to consume.
Yes. The camera angles are shaping your soul's response to the narrative. So the next time you open your Bible, ask yourself, what other hidden architectural wonders are waiting in the chapters I've skimmed over 100 times? The director left the commentary track on. We just have to know how to listen. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we will see you next time.